What's up, everybody? Welcome. Guy here. Hey, guys. It is Thursday afternoon. So, for everybody who had Christmas, hope you had a Merry Christmas. If you're doing Hanukkah, hope you're having a good second night of Hanukkah. We got Thursday Night Football. There was the Adam Schefter report that Pete Carroll is interested in the Bears job. I told you that a week or two ago, that Pete Carroll would be a Bears candidate. I saw Danny Parkins said he doesn't impress him. If every former coach will want the Bears job. Yeah, but Pete Carroll's different and that organization is different. I think Pete Carroll would resonate with them, but that's a separate conversation for another time. I am, despite the fact that the 49ers are no longer in any sort of playoff race, they're in the fourth place race and the good draft pick race. Looking forward to Monday Night Football against the Detroit Lions. I'm not sure if I'm in the minority or the majority among you, but even when your season is done in terms of playoff potential, you still only get so many games. And if they were playing the Bucs or the Bears this week, I'd be less entertained. But they are playing the Lions, and I think the Lions are fascinating. The Lions are fascinating because the Lions are where the Niners were not that long ago. The Lions they look like the 49ers used to look from an athleticism, youth, energy. It captured people's imaginations. Maybe this is their best shot. Maybe this is their best year to try and win a Super Bowl. It'll get harder, but I think what's interesting about the Lions is they enter with a quarterback making good money. Right, Jared Goff is making 11% of the salary cap this year, and that's a place the 49ers have been before. They were there with Jimmy Garoppolo making 9% the first time they went to the Super Bowl and making 13.5% of the 49ers cap the second time they went to the Super Bowl. And, they will be in the position the Niners are in now in a couple of years. When you look at the Lions and the 49ers salary caps right now, if you take the top 10 players from both teams, the Niners have 7 of them. In 2025, it's going to change. It'll be 5. Next year, it'll be 5 and 5. In 2026, we'll see. That's a long way away. Where does Brock Purdy fit into all of that? That'll be part of next year also, and the year after that. But I think it'd really be part of like 2026, not 2024. So I think we're asking some of the wrong questions when it comes to Brock Purdy's salary. It's obviously going to matter. It's going to be a big deal. Is he dead set on becoming the highest paid guy or not? But really, it's going to be about what else do they do around him? Because when you look back at last year for Brock, and then you look at this year, what's really changed? And Kyle Shanahan was asked about it a little bit today. Struggling this year is going to help him. And I saw somebody put in the comments on the video, because the title of the video is, can Brock Purdy bounce back like Jared Goff did? Somebody said, well, first he'd have to struggle like Goff. That's true. The difference between Goff and Purdy right now, they're different places, very different places in their career, is Goff really fell out of favor where he was. McVay lost faith in him. He got frustrated with him, traded him to a fresh start, and that was further along in his career than where Brock Purdy is. So they're not, the Niners and the Lions are not a perfect comparison, but they're a pretty good one. Brock and Goff are not perfect comparisons, but I think they're good in the sense that Goff became a very highly paid quarterback on a team that has really good players around him and that he relies on. And I was looking back at some of Brock's numbers from last year. His time to throw number really stands out. Last year, he was 2.7 seconds. Now it's 3.01. And I and other people, a lot of other people, I think the most popular 49ers talking point right now is they need to draft offensive linemen. Did their offensive line get worse, or are they having trouble getting the ball out quickly and they're asking their offensive line to block more? I mean, if Trent Williams is healthy, and I'm not advocating for not making any changes on the offensive line. I'm just saying I think there are circumstances that affect one another. Just like McCaffrey being out and Ayuk being out affect Brock, it then affects how quickly the ball comes out, and that makes the offensive line look worse. Even though, and for what it's worth, I mean, take it with a grain of salt. Right now they're graded higher than they were last year by Pro Football Focus. And, I think a couple things people say all the time that get ignored. Coaches love talking about complementary football, to the point that I think we all just tune it out as a cliche. but it is another way to say team. Like the way your quarterback plays affects your offensive line and vice versa, and your availability of your most important player, Christian McCaffrey, takes you from number one in the league in red zone offense to the middle or the bottom in red zone touchdown scoring. All these things affect each other. But this is a team that went to a Super Bowl the second time with Jimmy Garoppolo making 13.5% of their cap and hurt. And I think what kind of gets forgotten about Jimmy, or maybe doesn't get forgotten, we've just moved on, but I think it's a little forgotten because we don't think of it anymore, so whatever, but is that Garoppolo started 10 games that year, that 2021 season. At least for me, I'll just speak for myself. I don't know about you. It feels like he played less. Like it feels like it was 5 games, 6 games, and then Brock took over. You know, Garoppolo was 7-3 as a starter. He had 16 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. In 2021, after we'd given up on him, they'd given up on him. He was warming up behind the bleachers in training camp because he was like, don't spend any, you're on the team, but don't spend any time around the team. You're going to be taking reps from Trey Lance. The problem with Trey Lance wasn't that Brock Purdy was better than him. It's that he wasn't better than Jimmy Garoppolo. And it wasn't even close, in fact, how much better Jimmy Garoppolo. It turns out I supported the Trey Lance. A lot of people knew here since then. I supported the pick at the time and then also supported him, not being the guy after it was clear that he didn't have the right really to earn that job back. But anyway, this is not about that. The Niners put a team together that Garoppolo was making 13.5% of the cap, was not the starting quarterback, started 10 games after he didn't start the season, the starter, and then got hurt, and they still went to the Super Bowl. So I don't think, the chickens always come home to roost when you pay guys, and especially if you pay a quarterback that isn't good enough. But the thing about Brock is, I got asked this question the other day by a buddy. He's like, do you think Brock's good enough to go to the Super Bowl, to win a Super Bowl? I didn't hesitate. I said, yeah, especially next year when he's not going to be making 15% of the cap. And I mean, he might be making 9. We'll see what the number is next year. Next year, Bosa's cap number is up to 20 million from 15 million next year. It's really big in 2026. Ayuk's number next year is not huge. So yeah, they need to upgrade offensive line. I think the hole that we've talked about for multiple years is not finding anybody who's even somewhat complimentary of a pass rusher opposite of Nick Bosa, and the defense going from a defense like a championship level defense to an okay defense. But when you look at all of Brock's interception percentage is the same as it was. His touchdowns are way down. My point is, I think Brock's numbers can bounce back pretty quickly if the level of talent around him bounces back quickly. Now, some people are going to say, well, that's evidence, and it's true. You'd be like, well, that's evidence that he's not a franchise carrier. He's not Josh Allen. He's not Lamar Jackson. He's not Patrick Mahomes. I think that's all accepted by everybody. I don't think there's anybody really arguing that he's one of those guys or that he carries you like those guys. The question with this team is just, can you build a good enough team again around him where what he does well is good enough to get you to a championship? And I'm just watching the Lions going, they're doing it a second time around. Now for Goff, it's not a second time around there. It's a second time around just in his career. But, they're not a cheap team either, and they're going to be more expensive. So this is kind of their year. But I think they've put him in a position to make the most of what he's got. And I do think Brock can get back to that. So we haggle over, well, I'd rather pay him 46 than 52. I'd rather pay him 50. Yeah, you don't want to pay him 60. And you'd rather pay him 46 than 52. Sure. But I think regardless of what they pay him, next year is probably not going to be the year where it really affects them. I think, this year got built up as sort of this last dance thing. And I don't think it is. It'll be interesting to see. The Garoppolo cap number that was big was actually the first year of his contract. because they could afford for it to be. They're like, let's front load this thing. I think it was 13 or 15% in year one, and then 9% in year two, and they went to the Super Bowl in year two. But for all the proponents of pay him, don't pay him, or for all the proponents of find another quarterback, can you get somebody else? I think it has to be traumatizing for Kyle Shanahan that when he tried to pivot off of Garoppolo, he almost torpedoed the entire organization with the Trey Lance deal and got lucky that Garoppolo was still around and got lucky. They got lucky twice. It wasn't just that Brock was there at pick 262. Hats available now. First shipment is going out. If you bought hats in the first in the first day, if you bought hats on the first day, that shipment's going out on Thursday. So it's on the way. But I think it had to be traumatizing for him when he tried to upgrade to Trey. He missed on the player, and they made a disastrous trade. And the reason we talk about fresh starts a lot, I think, for coaches, like should you make a fresh start, is because when a coach leaves a place and goes to another place, they get to draft highly again without doing any of the stuff that puts you in, without losing all the games that got you a high draft pick. It is a lot like being a kicker. The best kickers seem to be guys who someone else wasn't patient with. And if you heard Kyle Shanahan today, as an aside, he seemed very dedicated to being patient with Jake Moody. Take a listen. I want to play some of this from Thursday. This is Kyle Shanahan being asked about Jake Moody. Eric Branch asked him about Jake Moody, and this answer was illuminating.
He's your guy.
I still feel the same about him, that I believe he's going to be our guy. Everyone's got to perform and do things like that, and I think he has had a tough year. I think before his high ankle sprain, I think he was missed one. I think he was 12 or 13 before that, so I thought he was doing really well, and then had a high ankle sprain to his kicking foot. Since he's come back, he hasn't been as consistent, obviously. But I think a lot of that probably has to do with that, just common sense-wise, and hopefully he can get to the soft season, heal up, and find his stroke again, and play at a high level that I think he will, because he's real talented. I think he's made of the right stuff just from a mental standpoint and everything, and I think he has all the tools to be a great kicker in this league. He's still working to find that, though.
Is there something to be said for being pushed in training camp for kickers to have that kind of daily competition where every kick there's something riding on it?
I don't know. Maybe. I think you got the wrong guy if you have to. You do that when you don't think you're going to have a guy, but when those guys miss too much, you go get a new one usually. And that's what's tough about the kicker position. That's what's tough. I remember we were in Washington, and we had a young kicker who missed a number of kicks, but I didn't have much experience with kicking then. I remember I kept telling the head coach that he's cost us 2 games, like when are we going to move on from this guy? And he kept telling me how talented he was. You got to be patient. But then he lost us a 3rd game, and then the head coach had to make a move. But 2 years later, that guy was the highest paid kicker in the league and going to Pro Bowls. So he was right. We had to be patient, but how long can you do it? And so I think that's just what's tough with that position. There's no backups and stuff like that. So that's what the challenge is. But I believe we got the right guy. And I think eventually, I think he has shown that at times. I thought he showed that at times his rookie year. I thought he showed that big time, being 12 out of 13 to start this year. And I think he'll show us all that in the future.
Graham Gano is the guy that he's talking about, and he was the offensive coordinator, and the head coach was Mike Shanahan, of course. But Graham Gano was the kicker in Washington, and so I thought that was pretty illuminating. I thought after watching Kyle Shanahan throw his tablet the other day, that he, maybe he's had enough, but that does not sound like a guy that's had enough. Connor says that Brock is just like Goff in the sense that his level of play really reflects the quality of the team around him. If he has quality players around him, he's going to be great. I think for some reason there's debate about that, but I think that's a very good point, a salient, an agreeable point. I think you get into trouble when you have guys who don't elevate great players around them. I think Brock and Goff has really evolved. But I think you get into trouble when you don't have guys that elevate great players around them or can't make the most of the skills of the good players around them. I think Brock does. He's not a carrier. Most guys aren't. I disagree with this comment from Casey, who says Purdy is a flash in a pan like Kaepernick. Goff is an elite QB. Kaepernick got to the point where he would not have elevated great players around him. He would not have helped guys be their best because he was not an efficient player. Brock is an efficient player. He's an accurate thrower. And so that makes the most of whatever it is you're getting out of Ayuk or Kittle or McCaffrey. Like, this guy can make sure that they perform at their highest level. Kaepernick could not do that. It's what Goff is now. But, I don't think Goff has reached a level of football that Brock Purdy cannot reach. Angel says, do not spend any money and play Purdy one more year at the Ricky's salary and use available money for an O-line rebuild in the offseason with draft and free agents. That would be the sane, good business plan. I think there's a major flaw in that plan, not paying Brock Purdy. If you think that he can be good enough on your refresh, right? So when you get Ayuk back, you get McCaffrey back, you help out the O-line, whether that's in the first round or in free agency or both, then you are really closing your window quickly if you wait another year to pay him. And the reason would be if you're optimistic on him as a player, just maintaining his same level or getting a little bit better, if you think he can kind of be Goff and, maintain a certain level with a good team around him and then maybe even get a little bit better as time goes on. And I think Brock is better than Goff was at this point in his career. And I do think you have to expect him to improve. But the problem you run into if you don't pay him now, people say, why do you have to pay him now? You don't have to. But the problem you run into is that if you pay him now, you can really manage where his big money hits the cap. And as I said, it won't be this year, and it won't even be in 2025 when his big money will hit the cap if you extend him this year. If you don't and end up in a situation where he's a free agent, an unrestricted free agent, and then if you don't reach a reasonable contract with him, you might be in position to franchise tag him. I promise you this. If you don't sign Brock Purdy now, and you have to believe in him to do it, but if you don't sign him now and then want to sign him after the 2025 season, you're looking at a guy who's going to be $40+ million against your cap at that point because that franchise tag all hits your cap, as opposed to, whatever that number might otherwise be because you signed him and you can manage it. I don't know what that number might be, 27 or 30, but that's the argument for signing him now, other than, the other stuff like, oh, you like him, you believe in him. If you believe in him, you should pay him, whatever. It's the cost certainty that in 2026, he's still not going to cost you $48-50 million against your cap. It might be 31. It's a big number. It'll be the highest, it may be the biggest on the team, depending on what you do with, how you restructure Bosa. But that's the argument. Is like you really, if you don't sign him now, this is kind of counterintuitive. I don't think people realize this, but if you don't sign him now and he is your quarterback in 2 years, then you have almost you've artificially shortened your window because his contract, you either franchise tag him or he's gonna have you in the corner. Or maybe you'll give him a contract bigger than you want to. Now, you might say, if your argument is you're going to play out this year and then you're not going to want him anymore and you'll replace him. Okay, I don't think that's the case. I think Kyle Shanahan has seen how hard it can be for him to find a replacement. So I think that's unlikely. But if your opinion is you're going to play out next year and you're not going to want him anymore, then sure, I guess. But short of that, like, you better really be sure that he's not going to be your guy after this year and that you have another guy. Like, oh, you're drafting somebody or whatever the case is. You're replacing him with a 55-year-old Kirk Cousins. Otherwise, you lose total control over your salary cap if you just let it play out and then you're in a position to have to sign him going into 2025, 2026, and he can really play hardball and force you to franchise tag him, which you don't want to do, because that's really going to torpedo your cap. So I think that's the argument to pay him now. And if you pay him now, regardless of, we can argue over the number, but if you pay him now, that number is it's not going to be that. This is not the year where that number kills you. Anthony says he's played for 2.5 years of games. If you don't believe in him enough to pay him now, then you just don't believe in him and should be looking to move on from him with something else. Again, pay him what and move on to who? I don't think you can look at it in that sort of black and white world of, well, if you don't believe in him enough to pay him now, pay him what? Pay him like he's Lamar Jackson? Or just pay him money that top 10 quarterbacks make and still leave you flexibility for 2 years? I think that's where he's going to end up. And that's fine, provided that Kyle Shanahan does his job and John Lynch does his job. And, the other Brandon Ayuk comes back and does his job. It's all dependent on all that other stuff. So I think people think it's like it's the smoking gun to say that Brock Purdy is reliant on, the other players around him to be at his best. I think that's true. I think it's true. But I do think what he's shown, I don't like, to me, he doesn't look all that different this year. What looks different is everybody else. And that sword cuts both ways. One of those edges is, well, it proves that he's not a top 5 quarterback, which I agree with. But the other side of that coin is that he can help get you back quickly if you do the other things right that put him in position to make the most of what he does. The Goff thing is unique, is really unique too, from the Ram standpoint. Is they took the Niners guy, they swooped in on Stafford, maybe not swooped in, but they beat the Niners to Stafford. And I mean, just how often do you see these like quarterback for quarterback swaps that kind of work out for both teams? It's pretty crazy. You just can't count on. I don't even know who would. There's not I can't even think of what the example right now in the league would be. It wouldn't be, trading Brock for Joe Burrow, because Burrow's better at right now and younger than Stafford was when they did that deal. Like Trevor Lawrence. I don't even not as good as Stafford was. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what that is, what that deal is, but that's part of where it makes it so unique. But it turns out, the title of the video is can Brock bounce back like Goff? It's can the team around him put him in position to be the same guy? I'd be interested if we had Jared Goff here to say to Jared, like, did you change? Did you get better? Don't forget his first year there, Dan Campbell kind of called him out publicly. So I'm sure Goff has grown and evolved, and he went through some difficult stuff, and it's different. I think it's probably more severe than what Brock went through. I mean, he lost a Super Bowl, but McVay was done with him. Evidenced obviously in hindsight by the trade, but even you read some of the Michael Silver book, some of the stuff that was going on, like their relationship had really fallen apart. And so Goff had to go through some more stuff before he got to Detroit, and even once he got to Detroit. And it's never going to be the same because he was a top pick. The pressure that comes with that money initially, the expectations, how people view you, all that stuff is going to be different. So it's not the same as Brock, but to me, the comparison is just he's been paid. His team's still good. They're making the most of his skills. This might be their best shot to win the Super Bowl, but they're going to be around. Now, what happens when they lose? If they lose Ben Johnson, that's an unknown. Brock is not losing his offensive coordinator, and maybe Jared won't either. But it feels in the moment like, man, this is their best shot because they do get more expensive, just like the Niners, and maybe they lose their offensive coordinator. I don't know. Hey, by the way, Prize Picks code guy. Right now, I've got this flex play lineup. You get $50 directly into your account when you use the code guy at sign up. Whether you win or lose, you just make a lineup, use the code guy. I've got a flex play, which means I don't have to hit all these in order to win. Brock Purdy more than 257.5 passing yards. Monday Night Football against the Lions. I got to check the weather though. Goff 250.5 passing against the 49ers. Saquon Barkley more than 110.5. Saquon against the Dallas Cowboys. Saquon's coach had to be separated from the opponent this weekend from an opposing player. Caleb Williams. This game starts, if you're watching this live, if you're listening, we'll already know, in 45 minutes, more than half an interception. Jake Moody, less than 6.5 kicking points on Monday night, because I think they're going to have to, I don't think they can settle for field goals. Leonard Williams, more than a quarter of a sack for the Bears, for the Seahawks against the Bears. So that's what I'm doing right now at Prize Picks code guy. Prize Picks code guy. Oh. Comment here says room sounds very echoey today. Yeah. Awful mistake there on the setup. I wish I'd known that sooner. I guess you guys were getting the MacBook Pro mic instead of now this mic. So the sound quality sounds like a tin can. I mean, that would have been useful information 25 minutes ago. The problem is I'm plugged into the good sound. So you know what, guys? I apologize. Everyone just started jumping on this the last couple of minutes. I appreciate that. Doesn't sound like he's coming through the XLR. Look at Ice right there with the knowledge. Yeah, that's not great. That's not great, but fixed a little too late. All right, y'all. Well, I appreciate you hanging. Have a great week. And I'll talk to y'all soon.